get us started. I want to thank you all for joining me right now. And let me just make sure that, okay. Oh, yes. So let's get us going. So thank you so much for joining me on our first webcast. My name is Peter Mullen, and I'm one of the financial counselors here at American Consumer Credit Counseling. I've been here for about 3 years, but I've been in financial services for probably over 3 decades. And what I do here is provide free financial literacy as well as financial counseling. And we are a nonprofit company. Just to tell you a little bit about our background, we provide free financial literacy and counseling, as well as counseling in debt management, community education, and a number of other things such as housing, bankruptcy, student loan counseling. There's lots of things that ACCC does. We've been in business since 1991, so we're almost at 30 years right now. And so the kinds of things that we do is that we help consumers nationally. So really we have people joining us today. Over 200 have registered, which is fantastic for our first broadcast. And our goal here is, in what we've been doing, is helping people manage their money and their debt and their credit for well over 30 years. So I thank you so much for joining us. This is on the basics of budgeting. It's a very foundational and very important topic to cover. Thank you so much for joining us today. Let's get started with our session today. So the purpose of our session and the plans we have for today is really to cover two main things with you. The starting point is to follow some proven steps that people can make to help them follow a budget, make and follow a budget. And so I've been an educator for a good long time, as I've indicated. But really, one of the things that we can do is we can do our best to help talk to you about various steps, but the doing part is up to you. So I hope very much that you will learn some really good tips and actually practice some of them when we're done today. The second part of this today is to encourage you to use budgeting as a way for you to more effectively manage your own money. And that's one of the keys right there. It's your money. So why not find a way to better manage it to what's important to you? And I can almost make this statement without any equivocation, and that is, you really can't manage your money without a budget. Because budgets are nothing more than really keeping track of all your income and all your expenses. And whether it's you or somebody else, if you don't have a budget, or at least that process, you really can't know where your money is and where your money is going. So our agenda for today and what we're trying to do is we want to also respond to your budget challenges that you have given us. And you've given us some really good ones. We have them all written down. We have some really basic things that you've told us, and we want to cover some of those where we can today in our hour together. Our agenda that we have today, I want to just set up some expectations for us. And that is that, number one, first of all, you're all muted at this point, but we do have a couple opportunities for your written questions. And I have my colleague with me. Her name is Maddie. And I sometimes will be asking Maddie to please pass along questions to us. We'll have a couple points where we do that, and we hope that you will then help us out with that. We will supply some documents for you to take away with you. And the documents that we have is this presentation. You can have this when you're done. So if you can't read all the print or write down notes, you'll have that. You also have an Excel spreadsheet, which is really our example of a budget sheet. It's something that really will help you through that process. You also will have in here a recording of the webinar that's done. Our expectations of our webinar also leads us to really what we're trying to do. The budget process that we have is really a 4-step process. It's a very proven process, and that is simply to set your goals first, get and record financial information, then to plan and to spend and save. It's not simply just a spontaneous process. It's something that's a thoughtful process, and then review and revise. So like they talk about rinse, review, well, we're going to do this circular process, and then we'll summarize where we are today. Okay, that's our plan. I hope that you're in the right place, and you will join us for some of the questions that we do. So let's move on into really then some of our content for today. And I thank you again and looking forward to some of your thoughts. So we heard a lot of your thoughts at the very beginning in the challenge. And this is one of the things here that we all wish we had, and that is a crystal ball. We all wish we had the ability to be able to see the future. Unfortunately, we don't. So if you think about just a couple years ago, what came out when the government shut down for a couple of weeks was that a lot of people realized just how tight they were with their money. They didn't realize until they weren't getting a paycheck every week, every 2 weeks, that really 57% of the households across the US could not really come up with $1,000. And in this last year has been a difficult time for all of us. And again, it's helped to reveal not only the challenges of unemployment up and down, but it's also helped us to see that even less people have the ability really to come up with $1,000 if they had to. So that challenge really makes it for us. Then, how do we deal with that? So the unexpected is a challenge. And what I can say to you, and hopefully this is where the motivation part comes in for you all, that one of the greatest ways that you could be prepared for an unexpected item is to have a budget. And so that's what we're hoping that you will stay with us on. It's almost like having a spare tire in your car. Think about it for a second. You're going down the highway and you have a flat, your ability to go to the trunk, pull out a tire, you can keep on going. But let's think about it when you do not have a spare tire. So that brings us to our next thought here on the whole idea of what really defines being ready for the unexpected. So within we're not a financial world. The Consumer Financial Protection Bureau defines one of the signs of health is the ability to absorb a financial shock. So whereas a lot of you did come back and say to us, unexpected things get in the way. That's absolutely true. And I'm just looking at the statistics of the over 200 folks that responded to us today. Over 20% said it's the unexpected things that throws off my budget. But I just say to you, isn't this kind of life? I know that when I look at these items here in my life, I've had all of them and I've had more. I didn't know when they were going to occur. The fact is they did occur at some point, and we'd have to be ready. So the challenge for us, if we do not have a budget or do not have savings set aside, is this challenge here of what are our alternatives? And so what I say to folks is that having a budget is what is the mechanism that helps lead us toward having some reserves. So then rather than having the broken down car or the cracked tooth, which nobody wants, you don't want to have to go and pawn stuff or go to a loan shark to try and get that money. Those are not great alternatives for us. So instead of that, what we say today is how we turn this on its head and we say, what about this radical idea? Why not pay ourselves first so you're ready for what lies ahead? And that's the model that we want to use as we do this today. So for us, and the suggestions that we have is that you start small. It may only be $5 that you put away in a month, $10, $50. But the very fact that you've just started to save something, for those that say, I can't do it, it's too much, you've made a critical course change. You've come now from being simply a spender to a spender and a saver. And that's not only a physical thing that you're doing, but it's also a change in the way you're thinking. You're starting to think ahead and begin to build up a fund. So I'd like to do this poll for you. We have a little quick poll I'd like to ask for those that are on board. I'll pull this up and I'm going to get this little poll going. And if you would please answer this all out, I'm going to share it with everybody. Have you made a monthly budget? So we have right now about 76 people online, I can see. So I want to quickly hear what people say to this. We're still collecting responses. Just be honest. We don't know who it is, who says they have or haven't. So give this another minute. I see about 77% of you have voted. So take another second just to answer this, and we'll share out what we have. Making a monthly budget is something we all can use. And even if you have made a budget, I'm hoping that there will be some great tips in here that for those that have done it, and I'm very glad you have, you will also find there's some other tips that will come to you as well. So another second, and I will close out the poll. Okay, so I'm going to show you the poll, what we have. And what we have is a little over half of you, which is great, have said, yes, I've done a budget. And a little less than half, 46%, have said, no, I haven't done a budget. So good, you're in the right place for those that have not done one. So what are some of the things that we heard when we asked you, what are the challenges? Well, these are very real challenges, and we've heard a lot of them before. Let me tell you what we heard from you on the challenges. Difficulty in sticking with a budget. That was number one. Something like 40% of you said that. So what that means is that some of you know how to do a budget, you know the mechanics of it, and it's the willpower. So we'll be talking a little bit about that to help you through making it a habit and why it helps you so much for so many things that happen. Others, a little less than half, have never done one. So stay tuned and we'll talk about some of the mechanics of that, how to make it happen, as well as really some takeaways that will give you the tools that you need. Okay, so that is where we are in terms of the whole budget. Let's move on and then into our next section. The next section, as we begin to think about where do your dollars go each month, right? Isn't this a common issue we all have? We all say, oh no, my money goes away. It's so quick and so easy. So what I want to think about here then is, well, if it goes away, where does it go? Well, where it goes is it goes to so much of life. Life takes it, right? We have so much toward housing, so much toward food, and so much toward clothes. It's so easy for this dollar to get spread around to all the things that we face. So whereas we talked briefly at the beginning about unexpected expenses, we have to deal with that. This is really what we're talking about here is a lot of the expected expenses, which usually come in two flavors. The two flavors typically are fixed and something like a house payment, mortgage payment, or insurance payment, or you might have variable. And one of the ones we heard the most from you is food. Food is a good example of a variable that you're not really sure of each month. So one of the things I can say to you is, where do your dollars go? Well, here's one of the things. A budget knows where your dollars go. So let's unveil one last thing here. Many of us will go through the process of spending out all of our money, right? And we have this little bit of leftover money, a little bit of leftover change sitting over here in the corner. And I remember my father, I loved my father, but man, he was not a good budget guy. And he had diaries that he kept for 40 years. And many times on every Friday when he got paid, he'd write down in the diary, had paid all my bills and had $1.43 left over. Well, I think that he did things kind of backwards, and I'd like to suggest how we can make things different. And the way you make things different is to flip this idea around and pay yourself first. Don't give yourself the remaining pennies. Set some goals. Make your best effort at setting that goal, and we're going to show you how to do that. So it's your money. Why not have better control of it? So how can we do this? We go back to the 4 steps. And the 4 steps are really what allow us to have a methodology. And it's a proven methodology. This isn't just ACCC making this up. This is proven from many different sources that it's a doable process. But you are a very important part of it. This isn't something that I can do for you. It's something that I can help tell you what the steps are. But in the end, it's something that you have to own. And if you do, you will reap the reward from that. So we want to be sure that you know exactly what we're talking about here. Okay? So setting the goals first. And setting the goals first, the first thing is, rather than an afterthought, think of yourself and your family first. What a concept. Number 2, get and record the financial information. So for this, without any judgment yet, we're not judging, just get the information. You need the facts, like Joe Friday used to say. You need the facts to discover where your money goes. So you have to know, what am I bringing in? What's my income? And where is my money going? And so that's the starting point. The fourth thing is, hey, you get this information, you write it, you revise it, you make a first stab. For anyone that's done one, you've done one, that's great. But it's not like you're one and done. A budget is really a dynamic type of a process. And the more you care and feed it, almost like a plant, it has a better chance of growing. So let's look at some of these in a little bit more detail. Just like I said, setting your goals first. You start small. So think of this. I like Stephen Covey, who is a great person who wrote about the 7 habits of effective people. If you want to have some tomatoes in the summer, like I love in the summer, you need to do some planting in the spring, some seeds. So the planning process of setting your goals is you setting out and saying, this is something that I want to do. Start small. If you set aside $10, you've already made a change. You've already begun to think toward the future, and you're putting money aside for something. Those unexpected expenses, or if you have extra money, maybe some goals that you want to set, other goals as well. Get and record information. We've talked briefly about this, but this is essential to the whole process. And I would say to, if nothing else, even grab a box. Just grab a box and start throwing all your receipts in it. So you need to have basically all the information that helps you to know, what am I making? Your pay stubs will help you know that. And where's my money going? Bills, records, statements, credit card bills, they all begin to tell you where your money's going out the door. Capture everything you can, and then you'll have an accurate and full picture. Plan to spend and save. So one of the things that we're suggesting here is that you begin to spend what you have. And I know this is challenging for some, but one of the principles or one of the goals within budgeting and really any financial process is you need to earn more than you spend. And for some of you, you said that you, and we know this, I mean, we've counseled people, that people often use other means like credit cards to offset what they want, but it's more greater than what they earn. So I just suggest to you that that's another whole challenge, but this budgeting process will help you get through that. So again, it will help you have hopefully a greater reserve of money in which you don't have to rely on credit cards as much. We're going to move in the right direction. And then finally, review and revise. And that's the process of you saying, I made a first cut here for the month of January. It's now February, try it again. March will come up, I'll try it again. So you continue to do this process and you'll find that it works. So let's go into these goals a little deeper, and then we will start again seeing really how do we make this work. Okay, setting the goals. When you are starting out, we heard a little more than half are already doing this. I guess I would question to the group, do you use these kinds of goals or these kinds of ways to help you doing the budgeting? And what this is this is using a acronym, SMART, S-M-A-R-T. It's not invented by ACCC, but it's a well-known documented way to help you begin to turn your goals or what you're trying to do to budget into something that's achievable. So think about it. If some of you are saying on the line or thinking on the line today, I want to learn budgeting because I want to get rich. Well, being rich is a great thing, but if you don't plan for it, if you don't set concrete steps, you'll never achieve it. So what we would suggest for today is really a way in which you, number one, you are more specific. You ask somebody, you set a goal. I want to save 500 for this reason. I want to buy this thing. Well, having it specific, could somebody else recognize it? Would somebody else know what you're talking about if you set up that goal? Measurable. How will you know you've made the goal? If you haven't quantified, if I say I want to be rich, well, what does rich mean? If I have put a number with it, put something that's concrete and I can see it and I'll know it when I reach it. Achievable. Think within the boundaries of what you have, the resources, You have a computer, you have certain skills, you have certain income coming in. These are the things that will help you to know, is it something that we can do? Myself and my partner, can we do this? Realistic. Think about your goals, research them, do a little homework, and then begin to look at your income, and you begin to put these together and see, yeah, this is a realistic goal. I know I can do this. And then finally, last and very important, is to do a time frame. So you say, I want to do this goal, save this money, and I'm giving an example today of, I want to buy a grill. So that's one I'm going to tell you, for the summertime. And it's going to cost me $2,000 so I can cook in the summer. Great. So I have to set aside certain monies to help do that. So let's look at an example a little more concrete. My daughter, it just so happens, is about ready to move out of the house. And so we're going to be empty nesters soon, but she has to get an apartment. So let's just look at how the SMART goal might work with that example. Okay. So number one, the S specific part. She wants to get an apartment. She knows it's 1 bedroom. She wants to include parking, and she wants to make sure that she also has utilities included. So now we know a little bit about what it is she's trying to do, and we know what it is and what it isn't. It's measurable. She knows that here in the Boston area, I know we have people calling in today or in today from all over, who are some from California, some from all over the United States. These are the numbers that we have. So your rent must be under $2,000 a month, south of Boston, we're in the Boston area, and be in by April 1st. She wants it to be achievable. So she has a job, she's making a certain amount of money, she has a car, she knows she has to travel to it, she's applied for it, it's realistic. She's something that she can split the first and she has to give the first and last rent plus security deposit plus moving. You all know these kinds of things, right? And she knows that's going to be $7,200. And then finally, it's time bound. So within her goals, she knows that to get to April 1st, she can divide that up into 3 dates: March 1st, March 15th, April 1st, 1,200 each. And she has the capability to then get to that goal. So all this is just showing a framework by which the SMART goal helps you change something from its kind of general to something very specific. I like this quote coming up from Maya Angelou, and that is this: do the best you can until you know better. And then when you know better, do better. So notice a couple key words in here, which I'll go back on. Knowledge is first, and that's what we're doing today. It's knowledge of the budgeting process. But once you know something, you've got to do something, and that involves some actions on your part. So let's talk about this next part of some of the actions. Okay, so some of the actions include getting and recording financial information. That's the lifeblood of any type of financial data that you need. Now, what are we trying to do? You're trying to understand how much you make. So there's an income side, and it might not just be a job. There's other sources of income. Maybe people have child support. Maybe people have a second job somewhere. Maybe people have an annuity that comes in. You need all the monies over here, and then you need to know where all the money goes. Now, this is the harder part for some because they don't want to admit it. So let me just tell you, I mean, make it easier to start. The way you can do it is, like I said before, get a cardboard box. If you've never done a budget, throw everything for the month of February, this month, into that box, all your receipts, and include ATMs. This is one of the leaks that happen in a budget. So easy, and I'm guilty of this too. I used to be very guilty of this. My wife helped me kind of get back in line here. You just so easy to take money out of the ATM and have cash. You never record where it goes, so you don't really know where that money went. So yes, throw your ATM receipts in there as well, or small notepad. So let me give you an example of one of the things we're going to give you today. So let me just scroll over to this if I can. All right. So you see right here what we're calling a daily expense tracker. So this is part of a workbook we're giving you. You'll notice it's a personal financial workbook. It's 24 pages long. It's yours to keep, right? It will allow you to keep record of all the things we're talking about in budgeting, but many more things as well. But the thing I'm focusing on for right now is this concept of the daily tracker and keeping track of expenses. So whether you put it in the box or you start to jot it down in a notebook, or you even use one of the many apps like You Need a Budget or Mint or the other apps that will allow you to keep it. The important thing is you keep it. That's what you're trying to do. Okay, so let's get back to our slide. You begin to have that information, you begin to organize it, and then what happens, here's where something starts to be magical for you for budgeting. And that's why this is so good. This is where some of the good stuff begins to happen. If you stay with all this and you begin to then organize that information, you begin to have what I call, or we call, aha moments. Right now, if I was to ask some people on this line, the 46% that don't do any budget right now, could you specifically tell me how much you paid on going out to eat? Now, I know this is COVID times, maybe you didn't go out much, but how much did you spend on your grocery budget? Do you know what it is this month? Do you know what it was last month? I know you probably can estimate, but what the budgeting process allows us to do is get to a point where it's firmer and firmer. And that's what you want. That's what you're looking for. Why is that important? It's important because then you begin to have what like I said, the aha moments. You have a partner, you say to them, you go, hey, honey, I didn't know. Did you realize that we spent $300 on clothes last month? Did you know that we spent $400 on going out to eat? And you might look at each other and say, no, I never realized that. And then once you know it and it's written down, that's the beginning of you both or yourself beginning to set priorities and say, you know, that's too much. I shouldn't be spending $400 for that. I'm going to change that. So you begin to get first what I call a snapshot of your money. Your first cut at a budget is a snapshot. It's a point in time. Now, what happens as you do the next one and the next one and you revise it? Now think of a movie. A movie is nothing more than a set of many, many, many pictures begun to put together. So now you begin to see a trend. You begin to see a pattern. And you know that you're spending month after month, you know, a certain amount on your food, and you know exactly what it is. And now you can begin to make changes. So that's the whole point. As you know it, you can begin to make changes and better predictions, and then make a choice as to where that money is going. So let's get to step 3 now. Step 3 is where we first start to see the budget. And so this is my sample budget I'm giving you. And this sample budget is nothing more than just an example of just ways that you can, that money could be allocated. So I've done the work. I've begun to put the money in here. Now for you, when you do your budget, it's going to look different than this. This is just my budget of me beginning to put in the upper left-hand corner all the income I make. And this isn't real, this is fictional, just so you know. But it shows money's coming into me, $4,200 through these ways. If it's not relevant to you, just simply leave it blank. Leave it blank. If you don't see the right thing in there that you do, cross out one of the categories, cross out mortgage, and write something else in that you use for housing. Bottom line is it should begin to reflect what your expenses are. We talked in the past about unexpected. Well, this is you trying to at least capture your expected expenses, which are largely in 2 flavors: fixed, like your rent, like your insurance, or variable, like your food, like you're going out to eat, like medical. Who knows? Those things happen. You're not always sure. But the repeated budget movie that you make will get you to a point where you have a better feel on what you're spending in a category. That's what you're trying to get to. So in this particular case here, this overall budget sample I'm showing you has $4,200 in money that I make per month. This is all monthly, by the way. This is nothing more than monthly snapshots. And then it shows $4,150 of expense and $50 left over. Now, we call that unassigned money. And in our world, we don't want any unassigned money. So what I'd like to ask you to do right now is you see this, and as you look at this budget, think of it this way. A budget, as you continue to do it, evolves from what is it today, that's what this is, to something that gets to be a projection of what could be. So for now, this is a snapshot of today, but we want to get to a point where you begin to amend it. So that's what I'm going to ask your help, please, to do this. So I'm going to send a message to everybody here, and I'm going to ask you this, if you won't mind. Where do you see opportunities? See if I can spell right. Where do you see opportunities? It's hard to think and type at the same time. To lower some of our expenses and add to a goal. Okay, I'm going to send that out to everybody right now. You should receive it. And what I think you'll see is a basic a flashing red item, which I want you to open up, and that allows you to answer it. Now, please look at the categories here. Some are pretty stark. I want to hear your thoughts. So please type them in. Hey, what category could we lower? So give me some of the ones that jump out at you. Maddie's going to then feed me some of those that come to that back to me. It helps me to know what some of your thoughts are. Okay? So I'll take a minute to kind of hear from her. Okay, I'm still getting them in. Let me just begin to pick on some of the ones I'm hearing. I'm hearing such things as reduce the amount you spend eating out. That's a great one. When I counsel people, let me tell you a true story. I used to counsel folks all the time, counseled couples or individuals on their finances, all for free. I've worked for nonprofits. I had one couple that came in and they spent $800 on eating out. Now think of that. That's a lot of money. So I never am in the process of saying to them, don't do that. I will say, if you're trying to make this goal over here, is there anything you can change? Well, so thank you for your suggestion. I had another couple come right after them who spent $200 on eating out. One of them is, okay, get a roommate. Great. Maybe you get a roommate to help cut your rent down. Absolutely. Fantastic. Maybe your cable and internet should be lower. Absolutely. Let me give you some examples here then of what I've come up with. Some of these are what you've just said. Let's see how this budget could be revised into this process. So what you see here now is my attempt to take some of the anticipated things that you mentioned, and here's the first thing you do. Here's where budgeting starts to change. You'll notice down here I have a financial goal setting at 500. The prior budget, my first draft, maybe that was a month ago, maybe that was 2 months ago. It had nothing for a goal. Remember, my goal I made up today was, let's buy this grill in June so I can do some great grilling and cooking. I want to buy a $2,000 grill. I want to save $500 a month. So the goal number one is first to set the goal. You may or may not make it, but you try. Number two, you all helped me here. You'll notice some of the numbers have gone up and down. So you'll see that some of these things I anticipated. Eating out, we don't have to eat 300. Why don't we bring that down to 100? How about the cell phone? I don't know if some people mention that or not, but the cell phone, I've seen people who I still talk to today. I help out with folks. Some people have a cell phone bill of 150. Why? Because they put all kinds of apps on it. These are some folks who are virtually coming out of almost homeless situations, but a cell phone does have variability in it. How about public transportation? Now, again, it's always great if you can live near a public like train or bus or whatever, but Ubers often is a case where a lot of folks end up spending lots of money. So these are choices that we make. Another one that you'll see here is some of these are, in fact, gone up. I put a little bit more money into education. I even took the liberty of getting a part-time job here and getting some extra cash. You'll see $300 that I threw in here. Absolutely. Some of you talked about getting another roommate. Cut my rent in half from 1,000. Get another roommate. Cut it down to 500. So with a little bit of ingenuity, you can play with some of these numbers, and then we do this by continuing to evolve it over time. So the two principles are. Here's the takeaway on this. is that number one, you plug in your budget, your goal first. You start with that, right? You put yourself first and make that attempt. Number two, down here, I'm going to show you the full total here for a second. $4,500 is what we made. $4,500 is what we've assigned. Now recognize I didn't say spent, I said assigned. And then I have a 0 as unassigned money. Your goal, because this is your money, it's not my money, it's your money for you to put it where you think it's important to put it. And this adjusts over time. So as you start to see the patterns, learn from what you did in December and January. Now that we're in February, you start to make decisions about it. Okay? Your decisions are you beginning to craft this that makes sense for you. So give every dollar a job. I like this. In a time when unemployment is still questionable, it's going down. It went to 16%. Now it's around 8. That's good. But you don't want any dollars walking in the unemployment line holding up signs. You want every dollar of your dollars to be put to work somewhere for you. And that's the key. So how do we do this? So let's talk about our own spreadsheet for a second. Let me quickly pull this up. So this is an example of the spreadsheet you're going to see. This is what we've included in our little package to you today. Our gift to you is this spreadsheet. We're not the only ones that have them. They're all over the place. Go to Consumer Protection Bureau or go to your own local government or go to FTC. These are well-known documented places that have all kinds of budget sheets you can use. Your goal is to collect that information. Remember, that was step 2. Number 3, put it into buckets that make sense. And notice one other thing some of you may have noticed, that some of these have percentages of the buckets. These are, again, just suggested guidelines. And I can tell you, having been a counselor before with housing, that if some of you are bought a house or are going to try to buy a house, then you'll know that there are ratios that they use. And so that obviously you can't buy a house if you have to spend 80% of your money on the house. So these guidelines are for you, and they give you some sense of reasonability, but it's not that you have to hold so tight to them. They are guidelines for you to use and begin to see. But the bottom line for you is you want your income to be greater than your expense. That's what you're trying to get at here. Okay, let's go back to our budget. Oh, here we are. Whoops, I'm sorry. Okay, we're back to our budget. All right, I think we got a little bit of time, so I'm going to try to go through this quick thing and then open it up to some questions that Maddie can hopefully feed over to me. So we've talked about the budgeting. We've talked a little bit about the mechanics of doing it. Let's go on to one other thing about preparing and keeping a budget. And this is an idea of just drilling down a little. And I know that you probably can't read the small print, so that's why I'm giving this over to you. But let's summarize so far what we've talked about and what we've learned. You need the SMART goals on a budget sheet to begin to put those together. And this process of what we're about to go through, and I'm going to show you just 5 kind of things to think about of how it gets better and as you do it. Think of driving for a second. So I'm sure that everyone online here, for the most part, is driven, or your friend is driven. You know what it's like to drive a car. Well, I can tell you back in my history, back when I was a young teenager, I wanted to learn a stick shift. And I remember thinking at the very beginning, this is impossible. It can't be done. So the first thing I had to do was know how to do it, practice how to do it, and eventually I overcame it and did it and became very good at it. That process is like budgeting. The first step is knowing how to do it. That's what we're doing today. We're talking about how to do it. Number 2, you're able to do it. So again, it's one thing to know. I know how to, I know how it is to play a piano, but am I able to? Am I actually able to sit at a piano? Do I have a piano? If I don't have a piano, I can't play it. Number 3, do I actually do it? So for those here today who never did a budget, you're learning what a budget is. You're learning why a budget's important. You're learning the mechanics of a budget. But will you take our spreadsheet, please, and then give it a try? That's you actually doing the budget. You do it, make mistakes, practice, do it again. Number 4, you begin to get to the point where you now measure, you get feedback. And as you continue to do a budget, here's a nice, remarkable thing. This is now February. I dare say if you now leave this seminar and start to do them for February, March, April, by the time you get to May, you'll have a great feel for those that said, I'm looking back at your comments, I don't know how to do it. You're going to have the practice of doing it. I don't know what my numbers are going to be. You're going to know what your numbers are. I don't know what I pay for various types of things, budgeting for variable expenses like groceries. I don't know how to do it. You will know how to do it because you've practiced. And then finally, proficiency. Not going to get there overnight, but if you continue this practice of making this from a snapshot to a movie and you give it a try, I'm not saying every night. I mean, that's crazy. But once a week, sit down for 15 minutes, look at your budget, go in that box, pick out your receipts, begin to fill in where your buckets are going. That's what begins to lead you to a point where it makes sense. And then let's just see where this is all leading to. Where this is leading to, if I've begun to set aside some money, remember way back when I talked about unexpected and we all talked about a broken tooth or something like that. Well, the fact that I've started to save some money now, put it aside for my grill, you might have now some money you can pull upon if you have to. I don't want to raid my grill money. That's for my nice fancy grill coming up in the summertime. But let me just tell you, I have a 21-year-old cat, seriously. And a couple of years ago, she blew one of her little pointy teeth. I don't know what you call that, the incisor or something. It cost me $500. Now, I didn't expect that, but I was able to borrow from myself, pay for that issue, but then pay myself back. And also, this shows you choices you have. I could lower my grill budget for a couple months, or I could move my grill goal out. I'm not going to have it in June. I'm going to have it by July 4th instead. That works. That's the important thing. Okay, so I'm now going to pause. I think we have some time. We have about almost 20 minutes left. I'm going to ask to everybody right now, what questions do you have? And this will open up the dialog box for Maddie to ask some questions of me. Okay, so you should now be able to type in some questions. I'm going to ask Maddie if she wouldn't mind. Please pass me on a couple questions that are important for us to know. Do my best to address them. We got about 15, 17 minutes left. Okay. All right, so here's the question. Does this include 401k or after monthly pay period contributions without the employer match? I'm not sure I fully understand that. I would say that this budget is not reflective of your 401k. This usually is your budget you're dealing with is monies you get in your the net paycheck that you receive. So we're not talking about the gross paycheck, of which then some monies might be taken out for 401k. That's a separate issue. We're talking about the gross, the net money that you bring home is how you're figuring in this budget. Okay. All right. So what type of savings do I set up for savings so I don't tap into it? Good question. I would say the little secret here is, and I've heard some nice tricks, have some of your money taken out each month automatically. So that's step one. That's great. So $100 is just taken out. I never see it. And have that money placed into account, maybe in a bank that's across town. Maybe it's in a bank that you don't have an ATM to, or you don't have an online account set up. So it means that the only way you get to that money, still there, it's your account, it's your money, it's just not so accessible to you that you can grab it. That's the problem. Even putting money in your mattress is the old-fashioned thing, is not good because you just lift up the mattress and take out the money. All right. Any other questions, Maddie, coming in? Okay. I can't not see another one. I don't know if there's another one coming in, Maddie. Try again. Let me see. If I am failing my budget, if I adjust during the month. No, you're not. You are living life. You're not failing your budget. Your budget is your intent, is you trying to do the best you can to capture reality of what you spend and make, and then you adjust with things. Now, the one thing I would say is you're potentially compromising your budget if you continue to raid the goals that you set. I mean, you try to make the goals firm and you're trying to adjust everything else so that the goal remains. So your adjustment part is real. So revision and adjustments are real. How do you budget if you're unemployed? Let me just say it's very, very hard. And for others who talked about variable income, if you have no money coming in, then I would dare say you can't really budget. The whole premise of budgeting is that you have some source of money that you're trying to manage. So you can be unemployed, and if you're getting a like I did, I just recently got back. I was for 7 months. I was on furlough, so it was unemployment money that I was living off of. Yes, I can budget with that because I know what the amount is per week. I know what it is per month. And then I begin to make changes and adjustments in the costs I'm doing. I have to be much tighter now. I can't have luxuries like maybe I have to cut out my cable as an example. Quick story that's true. At one point, our cable bill got up to $250. We weren't really keeping an eye on it. But when we started to look at it and saw it in our budget, we began to push back, and we began to basically get it back to, we simply got just a service like Disney. We got like, I think, a very quick internet, and we brought that back down to less than $100 through buying individual services, not getting it all through one. Okay. All right. How do I get a credit report from the three main sources? I would just say to folks, that's really with credit, but what you do is you go to annualcreditreport.com and it's free, and make sure you put in www.annualcreditreport.com. You all can get a free credit report, which is part of your overall picture. And here's one thing that I just learned the other day, because we're in COVID year, usually you only get them one a year. You can now get one a week for free. No scores, just the report. Okay, let's move on. We'll come back to questions if we have time. Thank you for the questions. Keep them coming. Thank you. All right, so what's next? The next thing is step 4. We've talked about 3 steps so far. Let's go to step 4. The records that you're all keeping, the records that you're keeping are very, very critical. They move from guesses and from estimates to something that's firmer, to solid estimates, to solid expectations. So here's the good thing. Not only are you getting better at this, but you, as I said before, you're moving from being just a spender to a spender and a saver. Psychologically, that's very important. It's a new trajectory for you. You're moving in a positive direction because you have the spending here and some amount of savings here. Obviously, the more that grows, the savings, whether it be a goal item or simply an emergency fund, that's monies you can draw upon if you need it. It's something that helps you have that flexibility that so many people ask for. And I go back to what you said in your challenges. You said, living with inconsistent income, having unexpected expenses. This set aside of money can help you deal with some of those hills and valleys that we have. For those that mentioned to me in the dialogue, I have income that goes up and down. What I would suggest to you is what you need to do is, for you folks, let's say you're a consultant or you get a lot of hours this month and not a lot of hours the next, you need to kind of think and manage to the lowest average. So you got to look at 2 or 3 months worth of monies coming in. Maybe you're a waitress and the monies come in flexible. Look at your lowest average and then budget to that. And hopefully, if there's a time when the money comes in great one month, you need to save that money. If I on average make $2,000 per month, $2,000 per month on average, and one month I get a nice hit, $3,000, take that $1,000 and save it aside. And by the way, tax time is coming up. Same thing. For those that are going to get a return, the best thing to do, if you can, is take that money and put it in the bank, save it. because that's a lump of money you just not counted in your normal income. If you want to get really proficient, you do in fact pull in things that happen once a quarter or once a year, but that's advanced budgeting 202. We're now on 101. Okay, so we're still on the revising and planning for today. So your budget begins to move from simply a capture as is to a predictive tool. So you should check it out regularly. But here's the part that you need to do. People are saying, "Oh, how do I do this? Where's the motivation?" It comes back to you. It's like my wife just got her one of those exercise things. Don't we all do that? One of those ones you have to look at. You look at a screen. Can't remember the name of it. Now, in the past, we've had those, and all they did was collect clothes. We just stuck clothes on them. So if you're going to exercise, you got to do it, even if you don't feel like it. The same thing here with budgeting. Budgeting and savings tips summary. So let's get to our summary and wrap this up, and I'll still leave a few minutes for questions. Let's face it, the whole concept of budgeting and savings often is very boring to people. Some people say it's too restrictive. I can't do this. So let's think about what a lot of people, I think, deal with. Spontaneity is fun. The ability to sit in your chair, sit on your couch, or wherever you sit, go to your computer, go to your laptop, pull up a nice screen, a picture of what do you want? A beautiful tie like this. You want this tie. And so your ability to get this tie and have this tie, you can simply push a button and tomorrow, whoosh, that tie shows up in a box and there it is. That's great. But what happens is if you continue to do that without thinking of all the costs involved, then you could very well go over budget. So another thing could happen to folks, and I think this happens with some people, and they express some of the fear they have. Sometimes people don't do budgeting because they're fearful, and I got that from the counseling I did. So if you find yourself up at night worrying about all this money, you got the nice tie. That was a momentary, whoosh. That's great. But if you can't pay for it, then you begin to build up anxiety. So here's the way that we do this. The whole point of budgeting is maybe a little bit more dry for some folks, but when you do the SMART goals and you take a stab at paying yourself first through the automatic withdrawals that we talked about, the money begins to build up. You don't touch it. It's security. You'll begin to find that you will eventually get to that ability to spend without anxiety because you have saved first. It's your money. You're spending your money thoughtfully. That's the difference. I know that spontaneity is what advertisers want. They want to grab you through things. And so that's what they all want, right? You go into a big Walmart and you see a huge thing of cheese balls. It's about the size of a gallon, a 5-gallon tub. And you go, I need that. Well, you don't need that. So I like this down here at the very bottom. And I kind of point this out because it really comes down to, and it helps remind me of somebody who I greatly admire, and a name just dropped to you. His name is Trent Ham. And Trent Ham writes a blog. It's called The Simple Dollar. And it's a very good pattern for anybody who's spending and finding, I keep shopping, I can't stop it. I just can't stop it. Look at the item you're about ready to buy and count to your age. For me, that means I have to sit there for a couple minutes. I have to count to my age and then ask myself, do I really need that 5-gallon bucket of cheese balls? And you might find out I don't really need it. But if you do continue to buy things and spend on things that you don't need, that's a challenge. You got to think about that, because we've talked a lot about so far about the how to do a budget, the what of the budget, the when of a budget, but the why of a budget really is your motivation. And so the why part should hopefully drive you to then have control over the spending side because of the values you're going to gain. All right, I'm going to bring us toward the end, but before I do that, Maddie, we have a few minutes for questions. So can I see if there's any more? I'm going to just say, are there more questions? and I'll look for people to respond. So we have 5 minutes left. Maddie, maybe you can help pass some questions my way. Okay, shouldn't you save for emergency funds before setting another goal? Very, very good question. My suggestion is yes. By all means, you should have emergency funds first. But in reality, just think for a second. Money is fungible, which simply means, money is money. But technically speaking, you're right. You should have first an emergency savings over here, and you have to decide what that is. 1,000, 5,000. It's whatever you're comfortable with. And once you got that set up, yeah, extra monies can start going toward the trip you want to do or the TV you want to buy. But all that money is yours. Then you manage it wisely. Shouldn't you save? Okay, got that one. Should you save through a CD or other types of investments? Okay, that's a very good question. What I would say for our focus today, we're not talking about investments. I would say that if you find anybody on this call finds themselves to a point where they have a lot of excess money, you've been able to fulfill your goal, you have an emergency fund, and then you have excess money beside that, I would suggest if you truly have that much money sitting, yeah, by all means, consider doing an investment. The thing to realize is that's not liquid, meaning you can't access it when you need it, number one. The return you get on CDs is very, very low. So you got to know yourself. And if you feel you have to dip into that CD somewhere down the line, you're going to lose money. Should my bonus go towards debt or savings? Very good question. Well, first thing on your bonus is to put it into an account. That's number one. Number two, I suggest you talk with a counselor or you begin to do the numbers yourself. Should it go toward debt or toward savings? You ask yourself this question. If the debt that I'm carrying, typically on credit cards, that's the typical debt most consumers have. There's also like student loan debt. And the amount of interest you're paying or fees on that is so prohibitive. It's 15%, it's 20%. Then you want to make sure that you get rid of that thing first, because you're never going to get that kind of return in a CD or a bank account. Get rid of the bad thing first, and then start saving your money after that. So we're coming up toward the end. I'm sorry I can't take more questions now, but I'm going to have to move us off because we're coming right toward the end.